Hey now, welcome to Englit.org. This is Dr. Island, and today we are going to give you an example of an application of mythological criticism involving a familiar story to most people, which is Little Red Riding Hood. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the story, Little Red Riding Hood is the story of an adolescent female child who is sent on a journey to take her grandmother, her sick grandmother, something from her mother who cannot leave the house. In order for her to make this journey, she must travel through the woods, and she is told specifically to stay on the path and not talk to strangers. She encounters a wolf who distracts her in one way or another. The wolf then beats her to the punch in getting to the grandmother's house, dispatches the grandmother, pretends to be the grandmother. The child is fooled in some way or another to the point that the wolf reveals himself, and then the child is either rescued or not, and very often that rescuer is a woodsman. There are variations of the story, from very dark to quite lyrical and uplifting, but that's the basic structure of it. When we're talking about mythological criticism, the main element here is to establish which way we're going. In this case, we're talking about these Jungian archetypes, and the Jungian archetypes essentially take symbolism, which you would have learned in English 101, and they're expanding it to focus on the elements of setting, character, and plot that will ultimately reveal a consistent story that might be told from culture to culture to culture, with only variations that reflect the culture, but the basic structure of the story being the same. So let's talk about the story particularly. Little Red Riding is a story about an adolescent girl. Her age varies, but usually it's anywhere between 8 years old, in which the character would have enough intelligence and understanding to be able to complete the task, but may have a high degree of naivete and the ability for someone else to manipulate her, to a young teenager, in which we have more elements of sexuality, and that really has a lot to do with revisions of the story and, of course, some ramifications from the very original tellings of this story. Among the other characters in the story, we also have the mother. The mother is, of course, an important element because she establishes, sets the child off on this task. So we have some basic things here. To begin with the girl, we have the naif, or the child, or, even more importantly, the girl child. That means vulnerability, naivete, perhaps even a certain level of rebellion. In contrast, we have the mother, who is wisdom, authority, nurturing, but in this particular case, it's more about wisdom and authority. She knows something that the child does not. Sending the child on this quest, she knows that what will be necessary in order for the child to make it through the quest successfully. If the child listens to her mother, she can avoid problems, but if she does not, then things may arise that will not go so well. We also have the wolf. The wolf is characterized in many different ways. Sometimes, as we have in this particular image right here, the wolf is quite anthropomorphized, in which they are actually wearing human clothing. And other times, it is simply just a wolf. The wolf is an adult male figure. This character is older than Little Red Riding Hood. This character is more cunning than Little Red Riding Hood, and this character is voracious. The reason the character is a wolf instead of a coyote, a fox, a pig, a dove, anything else has to do with the human characteristics that we attribute to this particular type of character. And this anthropomorphized animal, which has human characteristics, is often very closely linked to our stereotypes of that character, that animalistic character in human beings, and those human characteristics in that animal. This character's job is to basically to attack and consume things. The girl is on a quest. The quest is to take this picnic basket from her mother's house to her grandmother's house. The wolf's quest is different. His quest is to get this person isolated and to consume her in one way or another, depending on the particular type of story that you're being told. And as you can tell, there are various permutations of the wolf throughout history, in which we have the wolf portrayed in some ways more like a natural animal, in some ways more animalistic, perhaps even more human. Sometimes the wolf is shown as cunning and thoughtful, even friendly. That's because this animal character is symbolic of older men who may use familiarity, cajoling, friendliness, even bribery to distract the female in order to get her away from others who may protect her. In variations of the story, the wolf tells her that there are flowers to be picked. The wolf tells her that there's a shortcut. The wolf tells her that they're going to have a race that ultimately distracts her not only from her task, but also establishes that the wolf can get to the grandmother's house first. Sometimes the wolf obviously is going to be portrayed in light ways, but eventually that wolf is going to make it to the grandmother's house, and when that happens, the wolf is going to consume the grandmother. Sometimes she's locked in the closet, sometimes she's swallowed whole, sometimes she's simply murdered, depending again on your story. But in this particular case, we now have an element in which we have this tragedy that has occurred, this homicide in which the wolf has taken care of this and puts the girl in danger because the adult female who would be there to protect her is no longer there. We don't have much about the grandmother other than the fact that she is ill. Because of her age and her infirmity, she is not associated with the wisdom and power of age, but rather the frailty and vulnerability of age. Remember, not all symbols mean exactly the same thing every time. It has to do with the context of the story. We also have elements in which we decide how much power we give to Little Red Riding Hood. In most of the stories, she does not look like this. She is young, she's naive, her only weapon is the basket and her wits, neither of which seem to be much help in the story. Certainly revisions of the story will give power to her, but ultimately this is definitely more of a modern take on the Little Red Riding Hood, perhaps even in the realm of revenge or retelling the story in a different fundamental way, which we'll get to shortly. This is some of the earliest versions of this particular work, and you will see that the wolf is not only dressed as the grandmother, which we now have not only... we don't have a wolf in sheep's clothing here, but we do have the doppelganger, the shapeshifter. This is the character in a story who is able to alter his or her appearance in order to fool the other individual. And in this particular case, the wolf is acting as the grandmother. In this particular story, the wolf is not only talking to the girl, in which she says what big eyes you have, what big hands you have, what big ears, etc., but he has somehow gotten her to get into bed with the wolf. This has to do with some of the psychosexual aspects of this tale, including the reasons why it would have been told as a cautionary tale, not for girls to avoid actual wolves in the forest, with which there's very little negotiation, but for them to avoid the wolf-like character of an adult male when she is by herself. And you can even see the look on the child's face is one of trepidation, fear, and even a kind of questioning as to what's going on. Finally, we have the woodsman. The difference between a wolf and a woodsman has to do with his or her occupation. The wolf is a character that lolls around waiting for an opportunity and then takes advantage of it. The woodsman is a man who has a job. He has a job that provides a service to everyone else. To that end, the woodsman is also an adult male character, but this adult is trustworthy. This is the type of adult that parents want for their children, whereas the wolf is not. If we were to make a correlation of today, it would be that the wolf is the guy who hangs out on the corner, seems to be exciting and interesting. He might even live a kind of a dangerous life, and he catches information and money and things as he goes along, whereas the woodsman is the guy who went out and got a job and is not available all day to have fun, but he's guaranteed to put some bread on the table and is not likely to do bad things to our female character. This character is heroic. This character is stable. This character is going to be the male that basically comes in and rescues what essentially has become a damsel in distress. Little Red Riding Hood goes from the protagonist to this very specific thing in which she must be rescued from her situation. Obviously, revisions of the story change things around. Maybe Red now is smarter, older. Obviously, in this case, she's significantly older, and she is out for revenge. She's going to come back wearing a wolf costume, a wolf jacket. Those revisions are not part of the original story. The original story, of course, has to do with this nature of this character going into the woods and that vulnerability. We haven't talked about setting yet, but a couple elements. One, the house, whether it's her own house or her grandmother's house, is a safe haven. It's a place for her to be enclosed and safe along with her family to protect her. The woods, on the other hand, are a very particular type of setting. Whether it's the woods or the jungle, and sometimes we correlate this with being in the inner city, what we have is a place in which there are obstacles which keep you from seeing what's ahead. There are things that can come out and get you, things that can be hidden, and therefore it is a place of mystery, danger, and adventure, sometimes for the good and sometimes for the ill. In this particular case, it is for the ill because it makes a barrier between the girl and the people who would protect her. Ultimately, in this story, we have a journey, a quest, in which the individual fails in her quest because she did not listen to the wise old witch, that wise old woman who gave her information and was trying to protect her. Ultimately, a strong male figure comes in and rescues her. The ultimate quest of the wolf is denied. The quest of the girl to get stuff to her grandmother is fulfilled, unless in that particular version the grandmother is killed. In other versions, the girl is not rescued either. It all depends on how severe the tellers want to make the tale. Ultimately, your job in a mythological criticism is to identify at least a couple settings, a couple of the main characters and their archetypes, and a couple of plot devices, quests, journeys, the initiation, etc. This paragraph is going to be long. It will be at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 pages for that single paragraph in which you cover those elements. If you're in the horror literature class, if you're in an honors class, if you're in a movie class, if you're in a children's literature class, even if you're covering a movie for an English 103 class, this is going to be a long paragraph that is going to explain many of the elements of this particular story that basically take symbolism from English 101 and make it into something far more complex and really far more interesting. I hope this helps explain things. You can always contact me at inglet.org, at ingletguy@earthlink.net. You can always check out inglet.org for other information, and you can always catch me on Wednesdays between 7 and 9 in the chat room. Have a great day, and stay in touch.